Welcome back to the show today. We are talking about why NBA players don't want to play the center position. Seems like every NBA player that's big enough and tough enough to play the center position would rather play the power forward position. Well, what's the difference between these two positions? How much different could they be? After all, they're a lot of times just referred to as big. The term is interchangeable for power forward and center. Are their jobs any different? Well, they're actually very different. The main reason NBA players want to play power forward rather than center is that the power forward position is more of a skill position, or at least generally considered more of a skill position. On the offensive end especially. Because on offense, usually the center is just kind of setting screens. It's kind of a dirty job. Most of the plays in the NBA are just pick and roll. And they all start with a screen from the center, so the center is getting hit 20 times a game. That sucks. And then on the roll, he might not even get the ball. And then if you do get the ball on the roll, your offense is pretty simple. You're usually just catching a lob or getting an easy two. So a lot of these big guys feel like they're being underutilized when they're playing center. You're basically just an obstacle for the defense. These NBA bigs fancy themselves ball handlers and shooters. They want the chance to face a guy up and cook. The main reason guys like Tim Duncan, KG, and Giannis didn't want to play center is they thought they were too skilled. Their talent would have been wasted playing the center position. The truth is though, Tim Duncan for most of his career was a center, even though he's considered the greatest power forward of all time. I think the reason he's considered a power forward is because at the beginning of his career, he was playing with David Robinson, who was definitely a center. Not only was he a center, he was sort of definitively the center. He sort of defined that position in the 90s. David Robinson was always guarding the other team's biggest guy. He always had to protect the rim. It's kind of funny to watch David Robinson defensive highlights because he played his whole career before the defensive 3-second rule. If you're watching, most of the time he's just camped in the paint. And then on the other end of the floor, most of David Robinson's points were scored right next to the basket. The man loved the dunker spot, he loved his putbacks, he loved catching lobs. And if he did get the ball in the mid-range, he was not shooting. He was looking to take it to the rack. Now, Tim Duncan had a more versatile offensive game. Tim Duncan's signature shot was a mid-range shot. It was that bank shot. Duncan would catch the ball pretty much all the way at the elbow. That's too far of a shot for most centers to be a threat. And then he would face his defender, while most centers would put their back to the defender. They'd use their weight to get closer to the hoop so they could get a shot that they were more comfortable with. Not Duncan. He had the ability to put up a cute little bank shot, or dribble to the basket and dunk on your ass. David Robinson retired in 2003, and Tim Duncan became the starting center for the San Antonio Spurs, although he was always listed as a power forward, which he didn't mind because he didn't have to battle Shaq for that first-team All-NBA center position. So how did Tim Duncan's role on the San Antonio Spurs change when David Robinson retired? Or should I say not necessarily retired, but as David Robinson got older and less effective? Well, Tim Duncan's rebounding responsibility went up. As a center in the NBA, a large part of your job is scooping up rebounds. David Robinson was the main rebounder for the Spurs, but by his last season, he was only pulling down 8 a game, while Tim Duncan was getting 13 rebounds a game. And this is the other reason players don't like playing center. If you're wrestling for defensive rebounds, you're the last one to get down the court on offense. You get less opportunity to score. Tim Duncan scored a lot though. As a matter of fact, his 2 MVP seasons were the seasons that he scored and rebounded the most. The reason he scored a lot is because Tim Duncan was a good offensive rebounder. He made a lot of his points with putbacks from his team's bricks. The other slack that Duncan had to pick up for old man Robinson was blocking shots. By 2003, David Robinson was not one of the best rim protectors in the league anymore, but Tim Duncan was. So David Robinson was still guarding the big man, and Duncan was the help defender, guarding the paint and getting over 3 blocks a game. So Duncan won those 2 MVPs because he was one of the most impactful defenders in the league, while also being the Spurs' leading scorer. So what prompted me to make this video was Anthony Davis. Since the beginning of Anthony Davis's career, he's made it known he does not want to play center. Even though he's one of the biggest guys in the league, he's one of the strongest guys in the league, and he's the most qualified to play center on his team. But don't you dare list him as center. Even in college, John Calipari would sort of trick him into playing center by listing him as the 4, but he protected the rim. So does AD just not want to be called a center? Is it just by name alone he wants to be considered a power forward? Is it just not cool to be a center? No, I think AD just hates being the only big man on the floor. He likes having JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard on the floor with him. He wants another big man out there so he doesn't have to guard Embiid or Jokic. Guarding a 7-foot, 280-pound man for 40 possessions a game is pretty physically exhausting. He wants the freedom to just kind of roam around a bit on defense. It's a lot easier, and the truth is you rack up a lot more steals and blocks that way. A lot of the most recent DPOYs are power forwards with centers that they lean on. The thing is though, Anthony Davis's team has always been better when he's playing center. Anthony Davis can operate as the solo big man on the floor. Even when he's double teamed, he's still a threat, and he's a decent passer. Anthony Davis with 4 guys around him that can shoot is almost impossible to guard. The Lakers' most effective lineup in 2020 was KCP, Caruso, LeBron, Danny Green, and AD. AD didn't like playing center, but because he did, he's a champion. Now, I'm curious why guys like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and Bam Adebayo don't mind playing center. Guys like Evan Mobley and Giannis don't want to be the biggest guy on the floor. floor. They'd be dominant as centers, but they just don't want to do it. Well, I think the reason for Embiid is he's always played with a lot of good defensive players. Guys that were making all defensive teams. Guys like Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, Robert Covington. These guys were big defenders and they could switch and guard in multiple positions. So Embiid was able to operate as that roaming big man. Then on the offensive end, most possessions start with Joel Embiid. Let's just pretend Joel Embiid's healthy, or we're talking about Joel Embiid in 2023. A healthy Joel Embiid has one of the most versatile bags in the league. He could get to the rim, he had that fadeaway thing, and he always knew how to draw some contact and get to the free throw line. Jokic is kind of the same way. He's always had big defensive guys to play with. So Jokic was never an incredible rim protector, but he at least could do the job. He was a presence down low. Then when it comes to rebound, he really wasn't spending much of his energy. He always seems to know where the ball is going and he lets his hands do the work. And just like Embiid, Jokic isn't limited to the pick and roll. The natural state of Denver's offense is Jokic holding the ball. He's a top 5 scorer and passer every year. So I think if AD became a better passer and started shooting threes again, he'd be a little bit happier playing the 5. He might not even notice he's playing. So if playing center is the worst position in basketball, playing first base is the worst position in baseball. Evidently, players don't want to play first base because it's kind of considered embarrassing. Of all the defensive positions, it's considered the one that takes the least amount of skill. So teams will hide their worst defensive player at first base. Well, their second worst defensive player. Their worst defensive player is going to be the designated hitter. And first base is easy for a number of different reasons. The first one is most of the balls that are hit to first base are moving slower than going to third base because 70% of batters are right-handed. Also, most balls thrown in a baseball game are going to first base. It's the first stop around the horn, meaning the first baseman has to throw the ball the least amount of times and also the least far. If a ball is hit to third base, the third baseman has to throw it to first base. If a ball is hit to first base, the first baseman doesn't have to do anything. So it's interesting, Rafael Devers was traded from the Boston Red Sox to the San Francisco Giants this year. And the main reason was he didn't want to play first base. Devers is a third baseman, but he lost his job to Alex Bregman, who the Red Sox acquired in the offseason. Rafael was told he was going to be the DH. He wouldn't have to play defense at all. But their first baseman got injured, and they needed Rafael to play first base, even though he didn't play first base. You think Rafael would be happy to play an easier position. But no, he didn't want to do it. His ego was too big to be a replacement first baseman, which is kind of funny because he ended up having to play some first base in San Francisco. I think the most desired position to play in basketball is the point guard position. Everyone wants to play point guard because everyone wants the ball. The point guard will get the ball with every possession because every possession starts with the point guard. The point guard also gets to dictate how the offense runs. He's in control of the game. He also gets to control the pace of the game. He can slow it down a bit if he's tired. LeBron James started his career as a small forward, but once he established himself in the league, he started bringing the ball up the court and called himself a point forward. James Harden was a wing when he was coming off the bench in Oklahoma City, but once he got to Houston and he became a star, he became the most ball-dominant player in the league by far. He was holding that ball all the time. It seems like once you become a star in the NBA, you get the option of whether you want to be the point guard or not. Look at Giannis. He's 6'11", but he basically brings the ball up for every possession. The Bucks' best bet for an easy bucket is to let Giannis go coast to coast. I think the biggest reason, though, that NBA players want to play point guard and they want to bring the ball up the floor is for clutch possession. When the shot clock is off, they want the ball in their hands. They want to guarantee that they can take the game winner or at least be able to dictate who takes the game winner. Basketball revolves around ego, and a lot of times the ball represents self-worth. If you have the ball in your hands, you're valuable. If you're a center that never gets the ball and all you do is set screens and sit in drop coverage, your NBA career might feel a bit unfulfilling at the end. Alright, thank you for being here. I need you to do me a solid. I need you to like the video. There's a Patreon. Check out the Patreon. I love all my Patreon people. They're my favorite. They're cool, they're funny, they smell good, they dress well. Be good to your mothers. Eat a corn dog.